Testing's really fun. It's basically DDoSing. You're DOSing things.
You have 3 seconds to convince somebody to do something with your website or they're going to bail.
Won't really have a number for you, but maybe I'll confidently say 2/3 don't have access to 4G and 5G networks even today.
The second that page becomes dynamic, it's harder to cache, and that's where the real dangers start to come into place. So, welcome to Impressive Hosting, where we seek to uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. I am Jesse Friedman, and with me today is Christos Paloukas from Pressidium. We wanted to have him on the show today because he's working in the WordPress managed hosting space and has a lot of great tips for us today. And also, we're all handing things back and forth here because I was on Christos's podcast, and we thought it would be great to kind of continue the conversation here as well. So, Christos, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Jesse. We had an amazing talk on my podcast too, and I hope this one goes well too.
Sure it will.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us the background of who you are, where you are, what you're working on.
Yeah, I'm Christos. I'm based in Greece now. I was born and raised in the States outside of Chicago, and I came to Greece in when did I come to Greece? In April 22nd of 2010. I started working in IT professionally since 2012. I've always been a geek. I don't know. I had access to a computer from my uncle in the States. He studied computer sciences, never did anything with it. And my first operating system was Windows 98 or Windows Millennium, I think. I don't remember. I had that amazing pinball game. Yeah,
I do remember that. That's I think that's 98. Yeah.
Awesome.
Maybe even
game.
95. Who knows?
Yeah. So in IT, I started off with systems as a bit of a systems administrator of sorts for Linux systems. I got involved with Linux 15 years ago. I was just talking about it earlier with this toxic relationship I have with Arch Linux on my desktop. I mean, it was great at first. I loved it, playing around with window managers and making things fast, snappy, tiling. And now I just want things to work and have buttons.
Decisions, not options. Is that the thing?
Pretty much. I mean, it's good. It's flexible. Like, I don't know, silly rant now. Some driver for my virtual camera to make all this fun green screen stuff happen, it got updated, but OBS didn't get updated. So I didn't have a camera. And I had a podcast scheduled the same day. And I was dumb. I didn't Google. I could have found the recent bug report from the end of March. But anyway, I didn't. And I spent half a day troubleshooting because I chose Arch Linux Bleeding Edge. Anyway, systems administration. Yeah, I worked at a company called CrUX. We did payment gateway integrations. That went well. It was probably one of my longest stays at work. That turned into freelancing at a certain point. That office closed. Freelancing lasted long enough for me to find a steady client that I ended up being their sysadmin full-time, mobilized. And then that turned into an engineering manager position because, I don't know, I love the team. And I had this knack of, being, what's the word? I don't know, proactively aware of the situation when it comes to, okay, if the client wants a MERN site, we're going to give him a MERN site, even if it's a 5-page website and they want to have MongoDB on the back end. Fine. I don't care. You want Mongo? We'll give you Mongo. It was kind of hard to convince the developers at some points to be like, okay, we could do this in Laravel, but no. And, just use a MySQL database. But no, the client wanted to have MERN written on the website. Anyway, communications was always my, I don't know, I guess, strong point. Actually humanizing IT, especially among the team.
I like that.
It's
Humanizing IT, making it accessible in a sense, helping people understand it.
Yeah, isn't it supposed to be like that? I mean, IT, before it was IT, it was ICT, right? Information Communication Technology, communication. But we kind of lost track.
You're right.
Yeah, it's basically information cat technologies today. The internet's for cats.
And so you said you started in freelance. I think that's a great thing about WordPress is so many people have started in freelance, taking on customers. They've built businesses up from understanding customer needs, which is a fantastic way to get going in the industry. And
Definitely.
WordPress itself makes it so accessible that anyone can
Really?
start, a company doing something around it.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult because you're a one-man show. You're sales, you're marketing, you're the guy talking to the client, you're support, and you're the actual developer, admin, whatever. WordPress.
Right.
So yeah, we should probably talk about WordPress. We both do manage WordPress, everything. WordPress. I never took WordPress very seriously, to be honest, until I started working at Pressidium, and that's about just a little over 3 years ago now.
Okay.
Sure, yeah, it was my go-to for websites because that's the way I learned in high school from Richard Nichols, my first computer/electronics teacher in high school. So yeah, it was always my go-to. But I started taking WordPress seriously from my performance engineer position at Pressidium. Uh, so what do I do at Presidium? I do performance audits on websites, whether it's front-end performance or back-end performance. Load testing. Load testing is fun. I used JMeter at first. Now I switched to K6 because JMeter, great, but it's old, very old. I don't know if you have any experience with JMeter, but even trying to get HTTP2 requests out on it, it's not fun. Anyway, K6 is great. You write code and it works. JMeter is kind of
Nice.
it's got a GUI. It's got one of those GUIs that's like some of the stuff that I used to see when I was growing up on Windows 98. But but yeah, K6 is way more practical. There's been a bit of a shift over the years. Yeah, I could say years now. Over the years at Presidium, where I started working with the marketing team too. And yeah, now I kind of do I'm not going to say 50-50 split, but I'll say it anyway. A 50-50 split between the marketing team and performance engineering for Presidium. Most of the backend stuff is actually covered and has been covered by the SRE team and the DevOps team. So I'm
That's
there for the
interesting.
testing.
So you're spending your time helping to make sure that Presidium's running as fast as possible, that individual sites are going and optimized, but you're also working with the marketing team. Does that mean that you are trying to translate the technical operations that you're working on into marketable messages for end customers? What is it that you're doing with marketing?
Yeah, that happens too. So full disclosure, at the WordCamp not at Athens, at WordCamp Europe that happened in Athens in 24, I just had this natural knack of talking to people, like well, what we're doing right now.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
they were like, "Cool, let's do more of that. Do you want to? Are you okay with that?" And I was like, "Yeah, sounds fun." And it's still happening today.
Right.
Uh,
So you're running the podcast. Is that considered marketing?
I guess is it. The marketing team definitely considers it marketing. I consider it just talking to people.
That's right. Right.
Yeah.
So what other aspects of the marketing are you touching?
Aside from being in the marketing calls with the people, I do communications. I talk on post status. I'm not in charge of things like sales or partnerships. We have dedicated people for that.
Right.
I may be a point of contact for someone, or I may pass someone off. Plus, there's yeah, this is getting really full disclosure, but that's Presidium's way. Plus, there's like the personal Twitter that I started, which I
Okay.
wasn't on. I was, but I never used it. And I just started using Twitter more, and it's not so bad. I think I want to play around with like Blue Sky. I made an account. I didn't go any further than making an account and Mastodon. But yeah,
I'm
I just get the
excited
word
for
out.
Blue Sky. I feel like it's a green field of good conversations right now, but still limited. We need more people engaged there. Um,
I know.
what are you talking about on Twitter? What's the handle, and what is the general topic or thesis of what you're discussing on Twitter?
WordPress, myself, performance. Maybe I'll find something cool to retweet. Yeah, I do some Presidium retweeting too, naturally.
Right.
But
Sure.
I want to stick around like the whole performance side of WordPress without getting into the development side of things because I'm not a developer. Sure, I could write a couple lines of code. I could write some PHP. I could write scripts. Maybe I could write small plugins. But no. I wouldn't consider myself a WordPress developer.
Gotcha. And what's the handle?
At Paloukas, my last name Paloukas.
Nice. All right. Great.
Yeah.
So So when you're working on performance, are you working on it from infrastructural network layer, or are you working with individual customers and their specific sites? A little bit of both. How are you approaching performance?
Generally, like in the real world, for customers, but particular customers, or not even necessarily customers. They might just be leads, or they might just be people interested in like the free performance offer thing we've got going on.
Okay.
Which there's like a it's cool because I get more experience with every website that I get to optimize because every website is completely different, and there's always fun surprises.
So you're
From
actually
the
going
systems,
in and helping to optimize individual customer websites.
yeah. There's also the system side of things, but the system side of things is more testing because again, I started at Presidium like 3 years ago, 3 years and 3 months now. And most of the stuff was already there. Some hasn't been tested, especially for like, large scale load testing. And that's where I popped in like, hey, yeah, we could run some test routines and see where we can identify bottlenecks with like all the traffic that we send over. That was an experience too. I never had like formal experience with load testing. Load testing is really fun. It's basically DDoSing. You're DOSing things.
Yeah, we run into it all the time when we work with obviously WP Cloud works with many different hosting companies, and
Yeah.
the first thing we want to do is get them testing it because you can talk about it all you want, but the proof is in the pudding. And so we say to them,
Yeah.
have at it, but we have so many security layers in place to prevent DDoSing and other things that
Yeah.
we're just like, give us a heads up so that we don't flag your load testing as something negative. Because
That's
yeah,
happened.
it's basically what you're doing, right? Like you're attacking your own site with some
Yeah.
traffic to see how it's going to perform. Now, do
And
you?
what you
How does this work at Presidium? Like, does a customer sign up for a specific feature? Do they pay for something to get an analysis, or is it bundled? How does it work? How do they get in touch with you?
um We can actually so, like, what happens usually, our, DevOps support team, they'll get alerts if a site is going too slow or too slow for the particular site in question, and then they'll talk to the customer and be like, "Hey, your site's slow. Do you wanna do something about it?" And that's where I pop in. Or the other
Okay.
way around. Sure, there's sometimes that whatever automated alerts don't actually work, or maybe the customer's expectations are higher than what thresholds we've already set. And that's when, the customer would engage with us and be like, "Hey, my site's slow," which is probably the worst thing you could ever tell, like, anyone, any engineer of sorts, "My site is slow," because it doesn't really help me understand what is slow,
Right.
and I don't really know your expectations either. Like, "Okay, help me understand your problem, man." And yeah, we'll probably fix it. But, no, it's a service that we offer for, the front end performance stuff for anyone. The, like, load testing, it's, yeah, for the premium, series, the product line, there we go, there's the word. The premium site product line or the enterprise level
Okay.
for the, load testing, because load testing does take time. There's, like, the study part, there's seeing what aside from expectations, where do your users go? Like, what sites are what, pages are visited. It's not optimal to, I don't know, do load testing on your homepage if you've got a bunch of ads all over the place and you're sending people to different parts of your website. So why would I load test your homepage if everyone is, I don't know, buying products on your WooCommerce site? Plus, that's where the fun stuff is, all the uncached stuff, when users actually log into your website.
Right. The second that page becomes dynamic, it's harder to cache, and that's where the real dangers start to come into place. So a customer says they get an alert that says, or they're telling you my site's slow. Makes me think of that medical pain index screen where you see a bunch of emojis and the level of pain that they're feeling from 1 to 10. It's all relative, right? Because I might say my site is slow, and that's because it's loading in 500 milliseconds, but somebody might say it's slow and it's loading in 3 or 4 seconds. So what's the first
Yeah.
step you take to really diagnose what's going on with a site? What's something that people could take home with them right now and think about, the first step to really trying to apply some performance optimizations to their site?
Well, like any problem, I'd have to understand it first. So when it comes to like the Not so much the front end stuff, because, okay, let's do the front end stuff first. The front end stuff is pretty easy. I use Lighthouse or maybe
Yep.
PageSpeed Insights, but I try to stay away from PageSpeed Insights unless, of course, I'm trying to like send a link over to the client, because PageSpeed Insights can give mixed results depending on, I don't know, unknown variables that have to do with the Google side of things. Whereas Lighthouse
Yeah.
running on a local device, or something like SiteSpeed.io that I recently started using, we spun up it's a Docker image, anyone can download it. Anyway, it also incorporates Lighthouse along with a bunch of other front-end oriented metrics, like Core Web Vitals, all that fun stuff. When it comes to the front-end side of things, that's what I'll use. I'll scan whatever pages I should scan, including the homepage probably, but I'm definitely more focused on where the actual customers go to visit the website. Sure, the homepage might be important for ranking, but we still want to rank, or we still want to focus on the actual pages that the visitors are hitting.
Sure.
Then for the front end stuff, Lighthouse does do some of I guess most of the initial heavy lifting. It's got the suggestions and everything. Usually there's more behind the suggestions. Like when it says, okay, make critical CSS, that's not always possible, right? Plus, when we're talking about logged in stuff, Lighthouse isn't necessarily the best tool, I guess. It's more of an experience-based thing. For
So
the
for
back,
people at
that-
home, Lighthouse works like right in the Chrome browser, right? You inspect your site, you go over to the far right, you see Lighthouse. It'll give you some information about the existence of the site, the way it's loaded, things that you can do to fix it. So you're talking about like um, critical CSS, like conjoining CSS files, paring them down, serving them from a CDN or something like that. A lot of these times, these things might be outside the expertise of a customer. So how do you balance? Like, what is the response? Let's lead this back into managed hosting. What do you feel is the responsibility of Pressidium to that end customer to handle these things for them? Like, is it a matter of building a good foundation and a good hosting layer for them that they can build on top of, or are you holding their hand through this process to help them to provide a better experience? How far into this are you going?
I usually go further than I should. We have the same problem with the DevOps team. Most of the time, they do some things like some deep level code analysis to find where, I don't know, issues could arise. But where the demarcation point should be is me identifying the issues, like, hey, don't use a 4K image for your banner because it's going to
Sure.
take long to load. And you're going to see, like, if you do the Lighthouse thing at home, if you push F12 on the browser and click on the tab that you mentioned, not the performance tab, because that's
Right.
going to get complicated as the Lighthouse tab, what you mentioned. You're going to see something like that, something about improperly sized images. Or you're going to see like those really weird acronyms that are probably going to scare you away at first, like LCP. Well, if you see LCP at like largest contentful paint, that's the time when your browser finally makes it to rendering the largest image. Well, not necessarily image, but it's usually an image. The largest part of what's visible above the fold, we say. So like the first screen they get, whether it's on the mobile or on their desktop, which is a good point too. Typically, the mobile versions are going to be significantly slower. Personally, I love doing optimization. Well, depending on the website, most websites follow a sort of pattern where they're similar, the mobile version with the desktop version. Some websites might have a totally different mobile version. When they're relatively similar, like the menu changes or just like maybe the huge banner or some weird carousel things people still do, maybe that's not there. I usually go off the mobile for the optimization because, as you might see yourself, for anyone watching, if you try running Lighthouse on a website, you'll probably see that your desktop score is going to be really high. The score is out of 100, so you're probably going to see a 70, 80, 90 score. But on mobile, you might be surprised. Another really common issue is the way JavaScript files or like scripts and styles in general are handled. It's really easy to just defer all your JavaScript. And for most sites, that's fine. It usually works, and it's going to save you a lot of time when it comes to rendering your page. So these words might sound really weird.
Deferring JavaScript for folks at home, right? Is waiting to load the JavaScript towards the end of the after first meaningful contentful paint or whatever. Is that right? So that way you have something to see, some text to read before you load the JavaScript. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, just about. So if your page has something, JavaScript automates things on the front end, right? So with the carousel example, for example, that I mentioned before, you don't necessarily need the carousel to be moving from the very first glimpse of the website, right? You just need the image to show, and you need the image to show fast. So you're gonna avoid like lazy loading because you don't want it to lazy load. In fact, you want to do the opposite. You want to set this little like fetch priority thing to make it high. So that way it loads before everything else. And you could do even more. I guess you can, aside from deferring the JavaScript for everything to render and then JavaScript might run, is actually this one's a dangerous one. Executing the JavaScript files when someone interacts with the website. That's going to make your site really
wait for them to scroll or touch something or interact in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, but that probably, depending on your website and how complicated it is per page, because everything is per page, everything will change if you go to a different page. Well, usually. That might break the site. That's the fun, though, finding that like sweet spot, the middle ground.
The balance there. So actually, you touched on something that's always kind of been stirring in my mind. When I do a performance review of my site, you mentioned that you'll see a higher score for desktop and a lower score for mobile. Now, so like if I have both my desktop and my mobile phone on the same Wi-Fi and the same internet connection, is that the variable that they're making an assumption that mobile devices are on some kind of carrier network that's going to be naturally slower? Or is it that the processor of the phone is going to take a little bit longer time to render things? Why is it that a mobile phone would be inherently slower than a desktop site?
Both of what you just said. So I don't remember what the default is. Like, is it 1.44 or Mbps? Don't quote me on that. For mobile, it's what's the word? And not metered. What's the word? For when you make something slower on purpose.
Oh yeah, I think it is metering, or it sounds like maybe. I don't know.
Could be.
Throttling?
Anyway, throttling. There we go. So network throttling is something Lighthouse does do for the mobile version. And it also uses like some Motorola phones, CPU specs, and RAM specs. RAM is really important too when it comes to loading a website. This is like nitty-gritty stuff that you could see in the performance tab on Chrome, for example, or Firefox. But let's not really get into that. It's complicated. But yeah, it has to do with both the network, definitely the network. And it's really important to note that like a huge part of the world, I don't really have a number for you, but maybe I'll confidently say 2/3, don't have access to 4G and 5G networks even today.
Sure.
Or high-end cell phones. I mean, most of the gaming market on the Play Store was targeted to not sure now, to the Asia market. And most of the people in like still developing or countries that have developed like not so long ago, they don't have gaming consoles. They didn't grow up with Nintendo Entertainment System back in the day to end up having like a GameCube if they're my age when they were going through school. And now they're playing games on the mobile, right? So mobile is a huge part, and the mobile is going to be slower on a global scale. But again, so this is another thing. What page your customers go to is important, but where your customers are actually accessing your site from is going to affect your actual real statistics. We talked about Lighthouse, right? So there's this thing called Core Web Vitals that runs behind this like Chrome user experience program. When you use the browser Chrome on an Android phone, maybe an iOS device, maybe your actual desktop, and you give permission to have your data collected for performance analytics by the CrUX, CrUX it's called, which is kind of clever because it's got the user experience. Anyway, I like it. Project. What happens there is they collect data on certain metrics that Google tells us are important. It's a bit of a conversation there. Lots of text might disagree because those metrics are heavily theoretical sometimes, like interaction to next paint. It might not apply to actually like real world scenarios, but it definitely gives you an indicative result or an indicative number of what your users are experiencing. Anyway, once you accept all that stuff gets saved somewhere on the internet, and then it's used to rate like your website or web page, that particular web page, right? All that information goes out, it's recorded. Now you have a number. You have multiple numbers, you have multiple net metrics for your website. And you could say, and you can actually see that your visitors are experiencing these numbers. If I run the test from my home, I might experience better numbers, worse numbers. What we want to focus on is what your visitors are experiencing.
Yeah. So if you're an agency and you're working from your office, you may know to do this, but putting yourself in the shoes of your visitors is super important. We talk about this on this podcast all the time. Hosting companies need to put themselves in the shoes of their customers. Those agencies need to put themselves in the shoes of those visitors. So it doesn't help you to test your website on your mobile phone while you're in your office Wi-Fi, right? You got to disconnect, and as you said, you got to throttle. You got to switch to 3G and see what it's like loading from that. You're not doing yourself any favors by thinking that your site's running screaming fast because you're on gigabit Wi-Fi internet on your mobile device.
Total problem and misconception. Your customer is going to say it's slow, and you're going to say it's not, but
Right.
it might be for them. There's lots of tools online for like testing things like that. Testing different sizes, different
Sure.
screen sizes, how things will load. Definitely things agencies need to take into consideration when working with clients.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, and wow, this conversation is going so well, but we're already kind of closing in on like the end of this episode. So great conversation, but how do we, if I'm an agency and I'm building a website and I want to make sure that the visitor is going to have a good experience. Now, with other things, a broken UX, for example, it usually gets surfaced pretty quickly. Like I can't click this link, or I keep logging in and it redirects me to something and it's broken. But when we know this from, tons of, everyone presents this fact, right? Like you have 3 seconds to convince somebody to do something with your website or they're going to bail. From marketing conferences to SEO to performance, everybody's talking about that first little bit of time. So if people are just leaving, how is that information being surfaced up? Like, and a more apt analogy might be like if you're running a restaurant and you're not taking feedback from your customers, and there's a dish that they don't like and they never return. It's hard for you to be able to pinpoint it as this dish was a bad meal, and so they never came back to my restaurant. How do you do that with a website? How do you connect with those visitors and also maybe look at it from an analytical point of view or from a data point of view or something like that, where you're not actually interacting with them individually, but from a larger scale? How do you start to recognize that performance is playing an impact on not the performance of the site, but the performance of your marketing or the performance of your sales or the effectiveness of your content?
That's a good one. So regardless of what you use for Google Analytics, if you use Google Analytics, you'll notice a high bounce rate. If you notice a high bounce rate from like users that have only visited your homepage or the page that you're campaigning or sending, you're basically screwed. Like, sorry for the phrase, but not going to work very well. It could happen there. It could happen when they're browsing in your shop. So if say they've gotten to your store, they haven't logged in, they haven't had a reason to log in, and they're a new visitor. They're browsing on the products, or they searched for something, and then they bounced after the search. That's also a problem. Google tells us that if it takes longer than, I don't remember, 2 to 3 seconds, they might bounce. If they bounce in the beginning, like marketing-wise, they're going to go to the next search entry on Google, and they're going to probably shop from the next store. You're going to lose sales from a slow site. Like, it's not just a ranking thing. People really have to get that. Or it could happen at the very end too, during the checkout process. So checkout is usually handled by some intermediary payment gateway like Stripe.
Sure.
If you notice the order kind of almost going through, but then payment isn't ever made or isn't made, I don't know, for a good percentage, you know something's wrong because you know you already had that customer. They were yours. They were just about to buy your product, but payment never went through. Why? There was never there was never an attempt. It's because they went to another website. It's because they closed the tab.
And this is why performance is super important for SEO, because when they bounce back to the Google search results, Google's keeping track of that. They're paying attention to the fact that you were only in that website for a few seconds and then you bailed and now you went to another result. That result, that subsequent result may now perform better than you if this is happening all the time. So this is why we try to tell end customers that performance is more, it's more than just providing that one experience to a good customer, but it's also about the effectiveness of your marketing, the SEO, everything else is tied to performance.
Definitely.
So is that so do you so Pressidium puts a major premium on performance, obviously. And so you're a dedicated employee who's working towards improving the performance of these sites. What do you run into in terms of guardrails? Are you enacting rules? Actually, before we jump into that, tell us a little bit about what your current typical customer is like. Is it an experienced, WordPress engineer, someone who's working at an agency, or are you handling like DIY customers who are trying to do it themselves while they're running a store on their own? Where do you see your customer base?
There's definitely more naturally, there's more smaller customers, right? So there's more like smaller, simple websites or smaller e-shops, lots of e-shops too. Like people that you go, not necessarily on like the very small side of the entry plans, but like on the mid side of the entry plans, that's probably where the most of the customers are. Our focus would definitely not be so much on that end, but more so, aside from the money reasons, for the opportunity reasons, right? On the premium sites and on the enterprise sites. Like those are established customers, or those are established brands. Those are established, I don't know, stores or LMS providers. That's a big one. LMS, anything that has to do with
Learning
education.
management systems.
Yes. Anything that has to do with education and people logging in and actually following along with the course. And what happens there is they'll try us out. They'll have that whole 2 week or maybe longer. We can extend the free trial period. And the onboarding is definitely like streamlined. Everything is taken care of by the engineering team for migrations, and not some like automated tools, because migrations can go to hell really fast, really fast.
Sure.
But anyway, as part of the onboarding process, like the other kind of performance testing that I mentioned before, the load testing is applied, because when you have an e-shop or you have a LMS website, you would need to. So LMS websites have this issue. E-shops, fine, they might have a burst of customers not during a sale period or during some campaign, but LMS users usually have classes, right? And if they have live classes, that means that you've got 30, 40, 50, 100 students logging in at the same time. You have to know that, like, the systems on the back end, this is where the back end plays a larger role in the front end side of things for testing. You need to know that the site's going to be able to handle those 100 students logging in, pushing buttons. Again, this is dynamic content. These are logged in users. Caching is only going to help you if you have like a very well built site and you've applied things like fragment caching. That's when you cache certain parts of the page that are going to be the same. But even then, at the end of the day, it's only going to help you load certain parts of the page fast. And your students are still going to be waiting for the video stream to load and, to connect. Quizzes.
This came up in a previous podcast episode when we were talking about concurrent logged in users within higher education, especially around multi-sites as well. That can create a large burden on the site.
Yeah, that's when the actual systems play a role. So what happens there is we do load testing. We come up with the results. We definitely need expectations first from the customer. Like, okay, how many concurrent users do you expect? How many people do you expect logging into your website? And what do they do? They click on a certain course, follow that course through? Maybe there's 10 different pages on that course. Maybe there's a live stream. Maybe there's just videos. And then there's usually a quiz, like either intermittent quizzes or a quiz at the end. Quizzes are heavy, they've got that post request. And if you got a lot of students submitting a quiz, you might even end up with timeouts. Like at Pressidium, our default timeout is at 2 minutes. You might have students pushing the button, then waiting, and the request it's lost. It never makes it to the back end. That's a bad situation, especially for the student. On the other side of things, if you see it practically, if it's like some sort of university that, I don't know, you've paid for and you're like locked in, you're probably not going to lose that student/customer. I mean, to be frank, but they're not going to have a good time.
You're gonna be pissing people off, right? They're gonna be frustrating them, and they're gonna be annoyed. They're trying to get something done or get a project turned in on time, and they're against the clock, and it creates stress. It creates that stress for the end customer. Yeah. Listen. Yeah. So we started talking about segmenting customers. You're talking about how you have a large number of enterprise customers, but you also have a larger number of smaller websites or people who are doing this on their own. And so what I want to get into is talking about how do you lay a foundation that works for everybody and all that. Because I think that's super important as we think about the way in which managed hosting applies performance, layers to a website and optimizing a website. But we are at time for this episode, so I do want to just take a quick break.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on, and we'll be back at the next episode.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Impressive Hosting, where we uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. Do you have a follow-up question for today's guest, thought or comment on anything we talked about, a future guest suggestion, a hosting horror story? What do you think makes great WordPress hosting? All your comments shape this show. Drop them on impressive.host. We also appreciate you following us on social media and subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform. Finally, do check out our list of open source projects that need support at impressive.host. Whether it's code, community, or cache, you can make a difference. See you next time.